Mara. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
We're doing well. We have some
Good.
questions about why you picked this movie.
I don't really have a good answer for that.
Okay. Good
I
We're
enough
looking
really,
forward
answer
to
as
talking
any.
about it.
I
We, I
don't,
mean,
I
I
don't,
mean, we have a good reason why we said yes, more than likely.
that's interesting to me, the answer to that, because I wasn't expecting that.
His
But
name
I don't
is
know.
Denzel Washington.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's mostly it. I love and always have loved Denzel Washington. My mom used to make fun of me when I was a kid for loving Denzel Washington so much. Um,
Wow.
and I don't know, she just thought it was like a funny like fandom for me to
Not
have
to be
as
not to
like
be
a young
mean, but your mom sounds like a real jerk.
no, like not in like a serious way. But no, I love this movie. I love Denzel Washington. I love how ridiculous it is. But like, frankly, like I just grew up watching it a lot and always felt like it was one of those movies that, as stupid as it is, like it's so watchable. And I feel like there's not enough of those kinds of like dumb middle ground, middle brow kind of movies like that you saw in like this movie came out in 2002, but I feel like it's a 90s movie.
Oh my god.
Mm.
We're gonna have to talk about that because I legitimately
Yeah.
was watching it and looked it up at some point. I was like, this is 2002?
Yeah.
Wait, wait, guys, this is material. We gotta hold on.
Yeah. Come on, guys.
And we are streaming over YouTube apparently, so that's great. Good to hear it.
Right.
So happy.
Are we live right now?
Yeah, we're live right now.
Oh fuck! What the hell? I guess you have to put the explicit tag on now.
I do have to click a button that says this is explicitly not for children. Thank you, California. All right. I think all in all we are ready to go. Does anyone have any questions before we begin?
Nope.
Great.
No, I don't think so.
All right then. Counting down. 5, 4, 3. Today's episode of the Film Stage Show is brought to you by Mubi, the online streaming cinema. For your free 30-day trial, go to mubi.com/filmstage. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new episode of the Film Stage Show, the movie review podcast for thefilmstage.com. As always, I am your host, Brian J. Rowan. With me today, we have Michael Snydell.
Hello.
We have Bill Graham.
Woo, 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 woo.
And a special guest with us today to talk about the 2002 Denzel Washington thriller John Q. It's Laura Zarum.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I am exhausted, as I so often am nowadays. I'm sure we'll get into it in our before the scenes. Oh boy, it's gonna be a bad
Quarantine
episode.
corner. How about
Our
that?
quarantine corner,
Is that like too
COVID corner.
Is that trivializing the very real effects of COVID if we come up with a cute name like that?
No, I think if we don't do that, we let the virus win.
Uh,
I love the real awkward silence that just happened there. So excited for this. Yes, we will all do our quarantine updates soon, and I could talk about how tired I am, which is my favorite part of every episode now. But otherwise, yeah, we're here. We're here because we are going to talk about the 2002 Denzel Washington starring thriller John Q, which is about a father who takes a hospital hostage so that his son can get a life-saving heart transplant. We're going to get into why we're talking about this because I am still confused about that. We are also currently streaming live on YouTube. For anyone who didn't listen to last week's episode, this is something that we are trying so that our fans can listen in live and shout at us in real time if they so desire. What up, guys? Hope you're doing great if you're listening. Apparently, we currently have 2 people listening to us, which might be 2 people too many. Before we get into the rest of the episode, the usual stuff. Find us on Twitter at Film Stage Show, Facebook The Film Stage Show. Email us podcast@thefilmstage.com, and of course, give us a comment and a rating on iTunes. You can also become a patron by going to patreon.com/thefilmstageshow. For as little as $1 an episode, you can get access to our Slack channel, be entered into all our movie raffles, and generally help us to continue producing this show, even in this state of turmoil and uncertainty. We are also brought to you by Mubi, the online streaming cinema, where every day their fantastic curators bring you a brand new film to watch and enjoy. You can watch these films on the go. Of course, you can't go anywhere, but you can watch them on all your streaming devices. You can download them to your device, and every film persists for 30 days before disappearing, so you have a constantly rotating selection of films to watch and enjoy. The film of the day today on Lily Amirpour's A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Now, we didn't review this particular film. We did, however, review... What was the
follow-up? The Bad Batch.
Yeah, The Bad Batch, which had some style, had some flair, was not for us, but I've heard great things about A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. The synopsis is as follows.
It's a fun movie.
In the shadows of Bad City, a lawless hellhole inhabited by underworld figures, drug addicts, and pimps, a lonesome vampire wanders around. Dressed in a hijab and a striped t-shirt, she follows local villagers. One night she meets Arash, an Iranian James Dean lookalike. There is an instant attraction. So, if you would like to have a free 30-day subscription to Mubi, all you got to do is go to mubi.com/filmstage. Again, that is mubi.com/filmstage. And that is that. We can now move on to our quarantine corner.
Woo!
Yay. All right. This is just a moment for all of us to address the elephant in the room, and of course that is the fact that we have all had to make giant changes to our lives, and lots of things are happening, and we don't have control over most of them. Laura, how are you doing during this whole pandemic scenario that we are trapped in?
I mean, it's crazy. I feel personally pretty lucky. I'm doing okay. I have a job still, and I nothing's like disastrous in my life, so I'm lucky so far. My city hasn't been hit it's got it, but it doesn't feel too catastrophic, although I'm sure it is, and you just can't see it. But it's horrific to read about what's going on every day, but I personally feel like I can't really complain. I cut my boyfriend's hair today. It was great.
Oh,
the greatest show
I've been
of trust.
bread. I've been cutting hair. I'm rising to this challenge, you guys. I'm thriving, frankly. So.
Was this a voluntary haircut or an involuntary haircut?
You think she held
haircut.
him down and force cut his hair? Is that what you're saying?
No. It was he was pretty passive. He was like, yeah, whatever, do what you want to do. I looked at a YouTube video. It worked out pretty well.
All right.
Nice.
Michael Snydell, how's things in Chi-Town?
Well, my mayor is still yelling at people to stop congregating. Other than that, things seem okay. I don't know. I'm starting to lose it a little bit, and it's just I think it's my partner and I are realizing how weird we are when confined in a single space and no one being like, why are you being so strange or weird? And just, I'm not sure I'm going to know how to talk to people after this. Yeah.
Well, we can practice it now.
Oh, I mean, if you really want to, sure.
I mean, hopefully we have a conversation today.
I feel like I've snapped multiple times, and I don't quite understand how that works.
Snapped in what way?
Like a Slim Jim?
Like you punched a hole in the wall. You just started babbling uncontrollably.
Well,
started playing a spatula like a banjo.
That's next. Spatula is kind of a weird thing to play as a banjo, though, isn't it?
I feel wouldn't be actually playing it. You'd just be pantomiming it and going.
You know what? Now I'm a little worried about you, Brian. I think that's going to be the end of my quarantine.
right, Bill Graham, what about you?
So I, like many people, am trying to clean out my cupboards and, make sure I utilize what I have in my refrigerator and freezer and, all that good stuff. So, um, for some reason, I was on a kick of eating sardines because they're really cheap. They're also really healthy. They're fairly sustainable, but they don't, even as a eater of sardines, I won't say that they taste particularly great. They're not, there's something about opening sardine cans with your fiance nearby where she just starts walking into the other room and you're like, yeah, I get it. I get it. But so I've put myself into a corner. I have about 14 of these cans, and I've decided that for the rest of the week, I'm going to devour them. So these are my main meat or protein source for the next week or so. And I've already prepped all my sides, my carbs, my vegetables, my fats, whatever. But these are now it, and I'm about 2 or 3 in at this point, and I'm I'm starting to go a little crazy already. I'm like, oh boy, I'm really gonna have to spice these up.
How are you trying to hide sardines? That doesn't seem like a thing.
So mainly I'm making like a pate, if you know what that
Okay.
is. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just mixing it with veggies and dumping some spices on there and just hoping that I can put it on some bread or just make it the side dish instead of the feature.
This sounds like a move of desperation, Bill.
Actually, in the chat, we could finally say this. Someone actually said something. Matt Sapola said, "This is the most quarantine thing I've heard in about a week, and I love it."
Yeah, so this is me doing this to myself. I think the reason I've stockpiled them is because I went through a phase where I was like, all right, I'm gonna throw these in like once a week or like every few days, and it'll be great. And I just never got around to it, and so now I have like 14 of these things left around, and I'm like, look, and that's what I told Erica. I was like, I'm gonna eat through these, and she was like, you're not gonna buy any other
You're a
meats
horrible
for
human
this.
being. I can't believe you would do this to you were quarantined in a home with another person who cannot leave you, and you were doing this to them.
Yeah, what is your breath like right now, Bill?
I downed some chocolate, so I'm hoping
So
that
it's
masked it a
awful.
little bit. Yes, probably. I'm gonna have to. Luckily, we don't have to like stay in super close proximity to each other. We own a decent sized house, so she can go in the other room if she is not feeling my vibe.
Mother of God. All right. Well, as far as me, anyway, I'm still doing the distillery thing. We're still producing hand sanitizer. Still also producing booze. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm still working my 9 to 5, and life is really just—it's weird how quickly this has become normal.
Mm-hmm.
I went into Costco today, and I was like, I understand there's a life-threatening pandemic happening, but I kind of like that they're only letting a certain amount of people in at a time.
It is oddly nice
It's
to
like
like drive around and not have a bunch of traffic everywhere you go. It's
okay.
it's
However, everyone who is still on the roads is driving 10 miles below the speed limit, and it's driving me crazy.
they don't want to get pulled over because
I
they do not
nearly,
have a
I one of
reason.
these days I'm gonna get John Q'd, is what I'm saying. I'm gonna be the weird sort of like F story in John Q. And that's a great segue. I think we should now jump into John Q.
Nice.
Any other statements or announcements before we
Smooth,
move on into
smooth.
the thing?
Nope.
Let's get into this.
All right. Let's do it then. Again, we are talking about John Q today, 2002 film from director Nick Cassavetes, who, you may know, also directed The Notebook and
Okay.
also played the best like tertiary character in Face Off. Y'all know what I'm
Yes.
talking about? The guy who asks, he's like, "Hey Sean, how's your dead son?" He's also the guy who screams "No more drugs for that man" after Nicolas Cage gives his face-off monologue. Anyway, I feel like I really need to say that every time I bring up this movie, or the fact that that man then directed The Notebook.
I like that he did John Q, The Notebook, Alpha Dog, and My Sister's Keeper. This guy has range.
Yeah. Yep. That's
And then
crazy.
like nothing else. And I looked him up, and he got divorced and hasn't done anything since.
Oh.
Yes,
Yikes.
the blonde woman, the blonde, I guess abuse. How do I
Victim?
phrase this? Huh?
The abuse victim?
Yes, there you go. Yeah, that's her.
That's his wife?
Ex-wife.
Oh, well, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
That
All right,
takes
well,
on another.
we
Okay.
just broke this
Whoa.
movie goddamn wide open for Michael Slidell. This movie also has one of the most stacked casts that I have ever seen. Let's start at the top. Kevin Connolly.
Oh, Jesus.
No, it's got Denzel Washington. It's got James Woods back when he was a thing. It's got Robert Duvall. It's got Ray Liotta. I mean, it's
And
crazy.
Ash.
And Ash. Bananas. They're all over the
Yeah.
place. It's got
Ethan
Dewey.
Suplee.
Yep, Dewey. Good old Dewey.
To bring it back to another Denstoberfest or
Yes.
Denzebruary or yes. Anyway, we're gonna play the trailer and then we're gonna talk about it. Anything else before I bring up the trailer? Nope. So without further ado, here is the trailer for John Q.
Lieutenant Frank Grant, Chicago Police Department. Are you the man in charge?
That's right.
Well, who am I speaking to?
John Q.
I assume since all the doors are locked, this is a hostage situation. Is that correct? Okay. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned.
All right, so that is part of the trailer for John Q. This movie stars Denzel Washington as a father pushed to the edge by the heartless bureaucracy and economic realities of the American healthcare system, who takes an entire emergency room hostage so that he can get a heart transplant for his son after it turns out that his HMO will not cover the operation. We are talking about this movie because Laura, you reached out and just said you want to talk about it. Is that right? Am I misrepresenting what happened?
Yeah, and maybe mention it another time, laugh about it one more time, you guys. But you said yes, so clearly you were interested in talking about
We have a
John
standing
Q,
we have a
a
standing
fine
order
film.
that anytime anyone wants to talk about any movie that involves Denzel Washington, we say yes, and we try to
Well,
do it as
yeah,
quickly
I
as
mean,
possible.
appropriately.
We have no less than 3 different scenarios that we can use to justify Denzel Washington. We have Denstebruary, we have Denzember, and Denstoberfest. But we created a 4th just for this. We are, of course, none of us in the same room, and we are being very socially conscious. We are social distancing.
I thought maybe you were gonna say Denzel Washington Springs.
Oh, Denzel Washington Springs is good too. Yeah, that's a whole season.
Yeah, exactly. That's the great thing. You can go for several months.
Nice. Although I think Denzemberary is like 4 months crammed into one, but also skipping over one. But yes, we are big fans of Denzel Washington, and we're here to talk about this movie. So let's get into it. We're gonna do like, I guess, a spoiler free just up front, but like I'm not gonna have a spoiler section. This movie is 18 years old. So whenever someone feels like jumping into spoilers, they can feel free to do it. So Laura, let's start with you. What are your general feelings on John Q?
I love John Q. I always have. I'll probably always will. I love this stupid movie. Like, I know it's stupid. I know it got panned when it first came out, and maybe rightly so. But this movie has everything. Like you said, it has Denzel Washington. It has Eric from Entourage. It has James Woods. It has Ray Liotta as this like preening sort of captain who wears like all of his stars on his uniform, and mugs for the camera. It's the most ridiculous movie. But I've always loved this movie, and I was thinking about why I still appreciate this movie, even though it's like very clearly very, very broad strokes, to put it lightly. But sometimes it's something that is almost, it's almost a symbol rather than a thing itself. That's how broad it is. There's something kind of satisfying about that too, where, the evil person is super evil. Denzel Washington will literally stop at nothing to to save his kid. I don't know. It's just a dumb movie that I love.
Did you see it in theaters, Laura, or when did you
No.
come upon it?
This movie to me is like the sort of ultimate on TV movie. I probably watched it a million times when it was like just on TV. That's sort of the exact complete middle ground, like middle brow kind of mid-budget Hollywood schlocky thriller that I kind of miss, that you don't see that often these days. It doesn't really have to be good, and that's kind of why it's so much fun. And I don't think it was one of those movies that every time I saw that it was on TV, I had to watch it. But I'm sure I rented it or something, and I watched it all the time.
All right. Michael Snydell.
Yeah, so I don't know why I originally saw this, but I saw this in theaters.
Look, this demands a theatrical experience.
And I saw it with my dad, and I remember us being one of the only people in the theater on like a Saturday afternoon or something. So my memory is not reliable, but I will say that I had kind of remembered that this got panned pretty harshly. In the past, I remember reading like Ebert's review at the time, and I was actually talking about it on Twitter today, and Aaron Hammond actually messaged me, or it didn't message, he responded, and he was saying that, interestingly enough, he read a few reviews where Anne Heche's character was the one that they thought was cartoony and was unbelievable, which is fascinating to me. So
Her name
I don't.
is Rebecca Payne. And she's the hospital director.
Yeah, but like, I guess the thing about this movie is I almost think you're not giving it quite enough credit, Laura, because I think this is a fascinating time capsule of a very specific 2002 political attitude, a very specific Hollywood version of the Midwest, a very specific idea about working class people and institutions. I jokingly on Twitter said, you know what? Give me Clint Eastwood's version of this. I was realizing, you know what? It wouldn't be that much different.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, and I want to talk about that later, because I think that is what makes it so interesting, and for sure. We'll
This is
get
amazing,
into it.
because I definitely need to talk about Richard Jewell later in
Sure.
this episode in relation to this movie.
Sure, yeah. No, I mean, that was one thing I was definitely thinking about. But the thing I will say finally is so I think the actual subject of this movie is a really good thing to make a movie about. I was really failing to try to understand or try to think of movies that have been interesting about health insurance, and the only thing I could come up with was Extraordinary Measures with Brendan Fraser and Harrison Ford, and Side Effects, two very similar movies.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Is Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles, is he health insurance or home insurance?
I think it's home insurance.
Oh, damn. Okay.
But either way, I guess what I'm saying is I think there's a really this movie is really powerful despite itself, despite the fact that there's an insane number of racist and sexist caricatures that are insane. The way people talk about each other is it's just so bizarre. At one point someone defends beating up his girlfriend by saying, "I was drunk, all right." And I cannot imagine that in a movie in 2020. So this is a fascinating time capsule in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of things that are, let's say, creaky about it. But yeah, like I found it a lot more interesting than I was expecting to, in terms of like the conversations I think it can start.
All right, Bill Graham.
Yeah, this movie is wild. I'm not sure when I ran across this. I definitely did not see this in a theater. I think more than likely I probably watched it on TV. I may not have even watched it all the way through from beginning to end at any point until earlier today. But it hits all the notes that I kind of expected it, but it also does some interesting stuff. I think some of the performances are actually like quite good. His coworker is really good. He gives like a
Yeah.
really like emotional speech, and I was kind of like, holy shit, this guy's like going for it. Um, there's a scene of a fairly athletic doctor, I will call him, or I guess nurse, where he takes off and starts running, and you're just like, dude, what about a phone call? And
There's
so
like a
as he's like,
paging system, maybe. Like,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot.
As he's like running through the hall, I told my fiance, I was like, I was built for this. So yeah, that's some insights that I have about this movie. Yeah, I enjoyed it, but it is quite wild. Also, Eddie Griffin apparently wears his same outfit from Undercover Brother, which he also made in 2002. So I think he just
He
went
was
straight
splitting
from
time.
yeah, he went straight from the end sequence of this film into right into Undercover Brother. He was just like, I don't have time to change wardrobes, and they're like, it's fine, Eddie, it's fine.
Eddie, we actually wrote no dialogue for you. You are
Just
here to ad
improv.
lib. There is going to be a camera on you at all times, and we will cut you in whenever we feel like it's necessary. Oh, you said that man who beats his girlfriend was a member of the Slapaho tribe? Great, perfect.
That's what we want.
That is
That's why
both
we hired you.
racist and sexist, and it's perfect as we want in this movie. I Now that I've said that, I saw this movie like with my parents when we rented it from Blockbuster, I think, and it's weird because I have so few memories of so many things, you know. But I remembered every second of this movie for some reason, even though I've only seen it the one time. Which has to say something for it. I don't know if like my brain was just a sponge back then or what, but I was watching this and I was like, it is bizarre how firmly I remember every instant of this movie. And like, it also doesn't speak well to the movie because I, in my head, said to myself, like, isn't that's the movie where like there's like sort of some thriller elements, but like every 20 minutes they like stop for a 10-minute scene where the characters just have very obvious conversations about what's wrong in America. And my brain was not wrong. My brain was incredibly correct. This movie is heavy-handed. Might be too light of a word to throw at this movie. But that being said, this movie, I think, should be required viewing for anyone who doesn't understand why Denzel Washington is an amazing actor. This, like, he is an island in the center of this movie, giving a thorough, nuanced, beautiful performance. The kind of performance that literally only Denzel Washington can give in a sea of cartoons and other cartoons and slightly more obvious cartoons. This man stands tall above all of them and still is able to tug at heartstrings and get some gut punches in. And even though, and maybe because of this terrible script, he is able to really just shine in this movie. Other characters have no consistency whatsoever. There are no arcs for anyone. He's the only person who's doing a thing, and he is purely an avatar of this idea of like a single man striking out with righteous indignation against an unfair system. But he grounds it so much that you watch it and you're just like, I like this movie could be so much worse. It could literally be populated by turtles with signs on them that say what their character is. And with Denzel Washington at the center of that turtle parade, it would still just be a very compelling movie to watch. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this because I don't even remember if we said it on mic or not. This movie has big 90s energy all over it, and I was shocked to learn that it was made in 2002. And
Yes.
there's just like the Bruckheimer-esque guitar riff that plays whenever they show the growing crowd outside of the ER. This movie does feel like it should have been made by Tony Scott. It feels like it really wants to have been made by Tony Scott, but it was not. And I think that, as all movies do, it suffered for not having been made by Tony Scott. But we'll talk more about that. So that's John Q. It's a complicated movie to come after. But I do up front just want to say, like, you cannot say anything bad about Denzel Washington in this movie. The man's unstoppable. He was in a movie called Unstoppable. I didn't even mean to do that. He's just a great actor. He never gives less than 100%, and he's never anything less than honest on screen. The man never told a lie on camera. He's just great. So let's get into John Q. The movie opens with a car accident in the Swiss Alps.
Which, I'm sorry, but she didn't deserve to die, obviously, but she
Yeah.
she is so dumb about it.
Well, that's the
I don't understand why this is the way you start this film. Like,
I think this is maybe one of the reasons why I love this movie so much. Just like there are so many choices like this
Yes.
that you're just like, why? And but somehow I think, you know, to whoever was saying, I lost who it was who was saying that for some reason you remember like every minute of this movie.
Yep.
I feel like there's just something about just a few odd choices that make it really stand out, or just the way that it sort of seems to be one kind of movie and then it seems to be another kind of movie about like people living in like rural, like kind of Rust Belt America, and then it suddenly seems to be another kind of movie about like a thriller and it's a hostage situation, and it's just like they all seem like so incongruous, but somehow it works.
It's so weird. It is. I think that's what elevates this movie beyond being something like okay, so there's a movie called like Killer Elite, I think, and I swore up and down that I'd never seen that movie, and then I was going through my old movie blog, and it turns out that I wrote like an 800-word review for it once, and it was like, this is impossible. Yes, I think it's Statham and Owen, I think, and I read the whole review, and I was like, at some point, this is going to jog my memory about seeing this movie, and it didn't, and I still think that maybe I lied in my review and just didn't see the movie, because that's how much I'm sure I didn't see that movie. But John Q has the perfect amount of insane choices that stick in your brain. For instance, opening with this car crash, which, again, is in, like, insanely picturesque mountains, a woman driving, like, a BMW with a crystal...
weaving in and out of one-lane traffic on a mountain road.
With a crystal
to Ave
rosary.
Maria, just, like, cranking up Ave Maria.
Right, and you just watch this and you're like, this is a horrible human being. Like, this is someone who deserves to get hit by a Mack truck. Little do you know that she is immediately going to get hit by a Mack truck. 2 Mack trucks, actually. And then it cuts to not that. It cuts to the story of John Quincy Archibald and his family. It's just so weird, because I even remember watching, again, just how much this movie sticks in my head. I remember watching it with my parents and them kind of going like, okay, who was that? Like, why did we see that? And then I remember, I'm pretty sure that it went like, my mother at some point is like, oh, the woman's going to be a donor. And my dad said, didn't she die 2 weeks ago? Because it's a very weird thing to open a movie with a car accident and then come back to it after like 3 weeks of story time and having had the accident just happen. It's especially weird because John, it like I forgot that this is like the very specific thing that I forgot. John is like, I'm waiting on an act of God, and then it shows the accident again. To
I
let
know,
you
isn't that
that's
awful?
when it happened. And I guess, as you
I
said, Laura, it's very awful. But I guess God was like, well, this woman is a horrible human being. She's driving a
By the
BMW
way,
with a crystal
though,
rosary. I'm just gonna take
yeah,
her
I
out.
don't. Yeah, right. The rosary, the thing on the rear view mirror. I think that's. I mean, that's why they have to make her like the one that it's her fault that she died, so that we don't feel bad for her. We can just be happy that this boy's getting her heart.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool.
because
It's pretty cool.
she's I mean, she's rich. She deserves to die. I don't
Right.
know.
She's an icy blonde.
Listening to Ave Maria. And as we all know, if you listen to any form of choral or classical music in a movie, you are most likely a serial killer.
I
She
just
is.
Yeah, she had just gotten done murdering somebody. Yes.
I just realized, like, have any of you seen Return to Me? It's actually it's a romance that my mom really loves, so I saw it a lot growing up. Is anyone here familiar with that movie?
No.
The
It,
cover looks super familiar, but
with David Duchovny and Mimi
Mini Driver.
Mini Driver. Why did I say Mimi Mini Driver? But yeah, it kind of opens like this, like it opens with a
Oh
crash
my
and then goes
God,
to a
this movie.
very.
Jesus, I'm reading the
It's actually
description.
kind of good, but it is a bit tone deaf.
Okay.
But it's almost like this John Q. This exact point you're talking about, Brian. The point where it jumps from this like cold open almost to an entirely different family. Return to Me kind of does that too. Like where you see this guy's wife die, and then spoiler alert, he ends up in a romance with the woman who got his wife's heart. But yeah.
So it's like a rom-com 21 grams.
Actually,
Oh,
yes,
goodness.
it really is. Our return is actually fun. I'm not trying to hate on this movie at all.
It's also filmed in Chicago, so
It is absolutely not. Oh.
I do also want to point out that beautiful BMW driver is played by Gabriella Orltine. And this is the only thing she ever acted in, and otherwise she is a production designer and an art director and a costume designer.
well done. Bravo.
Indeed. Very strange. So yes, I needed to get that out of the way because I was like, I have this weird recollection of this movie starting with that car crash, and I cannot be correct about that. And then it did, and I was like, oh, I'm in for it now. I don't know. Someone else say something. I don't like. How do we even begin to talk about this movie? Michael, you wanted to begin by saying that this does not scan for you as a movie that is taking place in Chicago.
Well, yeah. So I'll actually say something of substance, but I'll just say my brief quibble, being a Chicago person, is that
There were no aldermans.
in no way are they that close to Chicago and in cornfields. Cornfields are not in like Chicago suburbs. Like it's very weird because it feels like it's trying to be this post-industrial, like Chicago suburb town, like a Cicero or something, and that's not at all what it feels like. And also, it's just truly bizarre. The street corner that the hospital is on that they're trying to pretend is Chicago for
It's
a
funny
number
you
of
should
reasons.
say this. It was filmed in Toronto, where I live, but the scenes where they're like near their home and it's more rural, for some reason were filmed in like rural Alberta. Like they didn't even go outside of Toronto. So it doesn't look like outside of Toronto either. Like you've got to get across the country to find those kinds of fields. So I mean, like maybe there's a reason why it scans as like completely not believable, but
Yes.
Well, the joke I made before we started is that no Chicago movie should ever have the people cheering on a police chief when he arrives.
Right.
That is the least Chicago thing in history. But for many, many reasons. But beyond that, I guess, like, Brian, to pick up where you're coming from, I think, as Laura was saying, like, it's really fascinating because this very much starts as kind of a traditional melodrama. and you get a sense that like, yeah, but it has a good sense of place. Like, he works at a factory plant.
A
Uh,
factory plant, a plant that makes factories,
no,
or a
Pretty
factory
much.
that makes plants.
save me then. What is the wording I'm looking for, Brian?
You could just say a factory,
Fine, at a factory.
or I mean,
And yeah, like immediately you see that his wife is at least pulling two jobs because she seems to be wearing a waitress outfit and she seemed to just start another job too. So you get a sense. I think this movie actually it's really weird because I think that it actually does a good job with a lot of the small stuff. It's just then very confusing when they do all this broad stuff because some of the small stroke stuff I think works really well. Like the way the church is involved, like um, the whole montage when they're starting to make money. Although I need to say that musical cue, that like a cappella gospel
okay.
song.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I did need to talk about this. This is one of the things that made me think the movie was not from 2000 because I was like, this montage is strong enough between the acting and the directing and everything to stand on its
Sure.
own. And it's weird because it does, like you said, have this like soul gospel a cappella thing happening in the background. And I was like, this is such a 2000 or like this is such a 1990s choice to be like, how do we underscore the desperation of this moment? And I would honestly be surprised if that song wasn't produced specifically for this movie to be an Oscar contender.
But they already have like the church music. Like they could have easily done that, like layered that over the montage, and I think it would have been a lot more interesting and less distracting.
Well, right, but this is
like,
from a time, or actually, it's not from a time. If it was from the '90s, it'd be from a time. But it's from a
Sure.
time where, like, you would have that happen. You would just be like, "All right, now here's a pop song. Here's a thing that we're gonna do now."
But I
It's
guess like once again, you remember it. Like I know you're talking about that song. I could sing it right now. Like it's so vivid in my mind. But like that's sort of part again what I love about this movie. There's just all these really weird random choices like that are kind of off. But that's maybe what makes this movie memorable and feel like something special in a strange way, which it is, of
yeah,
course.
no, and that's kind of what I was saying. It's like this is a perfect storm of strange choices to make this movie just feel so like weird and like memorable in that way. And there's so many more once he actually takes the place prisoner when he starts his hostage situation because like you have all
Wait,
these random
Brian,
ass
real quick,
insert shots of people like screaming stuff that we as the audience can see.
real quick before we get into the actual hospital though, I wanna bring up what Bill already mentioned. Like speaking of one other like little touch that's like way better than it has any need to be, even before, his best friend does that speech on television. Like I thought the whole way that their best friends react when Michael collapses on the baseball field, which, say what you will, that it's like staged in slow motion and everything, but like the immediate aftermath of that is like really chilling. Like it's a moment that as much as they like try to sabotage it with some of the syrupy like choices, like that's a moving moment. And I guess
Yeah.
that again speaks to that weirdness you're talking about, Brian, but I just wanted to quickly get to that too. Like I really think there are a few moments again that as much as sometimes the filmmaking tries to sabotage it, like it it just powers through, and that's as you're saying, like partly because of Denzel's like great performance here
Yeah.
too. But yeah, no, sorry, we should get to the hospital. I just quickly wanted to mention that scene because
Right.
I
And
really
also,
agree with Bill about that.
it's so we first meet Anne Heche's character, the most evilest woman on earth. Um, I just like there's a thing that I miss in movies, which is when the bad guy wouldn't even pretend to be a good guy. She is so immediately like, let's murder your son.
This is my favorite part of the movie when she tells them they're sitting, you know how like when you're in a hospital and you find out your kid's about to die and you're in a boardroom, like for some reason they like take this couple to a boardroom, and instead of the doctor telling them this, it's basic, I mean the doctor's there too, it's basically Anne Heche, the hospital director, who gives them the news that their kid is going to die, and like in the same breath, and you can't pay for it, and you need to accept that. Like,
right. It's not even like
so harsh about it.
It's going about things in the worst way, because James Woods first stands up and is like, okay, Rust Belt couple, you know, minimum education, cardiomyopathy, blah 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 blah, and then they're like, what does that mean? And he's like, your son's heart is garbage.
Well, what I love is they bring him into this boardroom, and then he like turns down the lights, and I was like, oh good, here's projector time, right? And it's like, no, look at this fucking X-ray that I just put up on this thing over here. Like, why couldn't we just stand up and be over here?
Why
like,
can't you do that in the room with the boy? Like,
yes.
It's, and then again, he does it. He's like, your son's heart sucks. He needs a new one. And then Anne Heche is like...
And I hate you. And
then Anne Heche is like, sure. You could get a new heart, or you could watch your child die, and I know which one I would choose for you. And then they're like, doctor, would you get the heart transplant? And he's like, well, fuck yeah, I would. I'm rich as shit. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I can nail this. I can nail this surgery.
Right. And then Anne Heche is like, okay, here's the problem though. You suck as people. And I don't like you on a personal level, and you have no money, and so we don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I understand that, like, this is what it must feel like, but I have to believe that if this situation occurred in real life, there would be some layer of bureaucracy that would keep Anne Heche out of the room from telling these people that their son needed to die because they were poor.
Yes, yeah. I think that's I don't know if that's like a lawsuit or what that could potentially be, but like you can't have the hospital director being like, "Nah, we're not going to let this happen." It's just like, "What?" Okay. So
yeah, and I'm pretty sure hospitals have like departments that help you help you raise funds and stuff like they will lovingly put you into bankruptcy. Yes, absolutely. Like I can't imagine why they're like, we can't help you do that, even like you have to go talk to somebody else, and it's just like some kindly nurse who chases after them and is like, you've got to do whatever you can.
Yeah, but that nurse comes back.
The nurse comes back and it's John Q basically saying like, hey, great idea. With a gun in my hand.
I mean, jumping ahead.
Do this, nurse.
Jumping ahead a little bit. I'm pretty sure this is the same nurse that ends up being held hostage later in the film. But at one point, okay, all right, fine, fuck it. Spoiler alert: John Q decides that, or not John Q. He goes by Archibald throughout all of this movie, except for the name that he gives them for some fucking reason. I don't know what's going on there. Anyways.
So I'm really sorry. Can I just like sidebar that, because it's really important to point out that he gives the name John Q like because he doesn't want to give his last name to the cop. But the reason why he's doing this and holding this hospital hostage is to get his son a heart.
Yes.
He's clearly gonna have to give the guy his kid's last name, and then immediately everyone will know his last name.
Right,
so
everyone knows his last name within 10 minutes. And then
and the movie is called John Q.
And
so
he is referred to exclusively as John Archibald for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay.
Questions.
Hold on.
Questions. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
All right. So that nurse, or actually she is a doctor because James Wood calls her a doctor at some point. So that doctor, at one point, Denzel Washington decides that killing himself is probably the only option that he has left, and James Woods finally breaks down and is like, fine, fuck it. If you do this, I will definitely rip your heart out and put it in your son. And
giant
the doctor,
heart in your tiny son's body.
Well, look,
But 3 times bigger.
Hold on.
His son's are 3 times the size of a normal heart, so he's got it. He's fine.
But so the doctor, the female doctor, comes to James Wood and is like, "No, you can't do this. You would be throwing away your medical reputation." And I'm just like, "What? Wait, what? Whose side are you on? What the fuck is going on in this movie?" I was so very confused at that point. I was like, there doesn't need to be the opposite. Like, there doesn't need to be the devil's advocate at this point. Like, he just said he's gonna perform the surgery. Let it happen. Like, I don't understand why anybody's arguing this. Like, your reputation is on the line. This is kind of a very unique circumstance, I would say. So if the surgery fails, I think everything is going to be okay.
So wait, is that's weird, because I thought she was the one who was outside and told the reporter about the plan to kill John Q.
No. That's because she's still in the building at that time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that's a different person, Brian.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because okay, so that's there's so much to talk about in this movie. This is going to be a 4-hour long podcast. One of my favorite things is that this movie, like Richard Jewell, follows the 90s tradition of having a completely unethical journalist who only cares about fame, a la Die Hard, which is 80s actually, who saves the day by being a jerk and forcing hands, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't cry though at a press conference, so
No.
he's not totally redeemed.
And John Q doesn't get to punch him, so that's another thing. Or John Q's wife doesn't get to punch him. I mean, so many people should have punched that man.
Which, by the way, why did John Q not go to jail for assault? I get it. I mean, no, I don't get it.
He's going to jail for taking hostages. Kidnapping and wrongful imprisonment.
Yeah, but he also punched the SWAT guy. He punched the.
I'm curious. I'm curious.
The SWAT guy shot him, so I mean, it's fair
if you're being attacked, I think you have a right to defend yourself.
Not if you're a criminal, Bill.
Hospital hostage.
You beat the shit out of a cop. That's called resisting arrest. There's literally an entire thing about it. You can't do it.
He wasn't read his Miranda rights. He had no idea what was going on. He just got shot.
That's an interesting question. At what point during a hostage situation do you have to get read your Miranda rights?
Probably the first time they talk to you.
I guess. What was I even saying?
I don't know. That's breaking my brain.
The crappy, the bad reporter man.
Yes.
That's a part. But the real part of this that feels like it's taken from a 90s movie is the pan-ethnic oddball group of characters who are in the ER when he takes them hostage. And after 20 minutes, he lets the first group of hostages go. And these people fucking love John Q. They are so on board for him. The Spanish-speaking woman is just oh, he's a great man. He's the best man. He's a saint. And the couple that's having their first baby are like, John's the best. Love that guy. Fucking rules. And everyone's like, oh, all right, well, we should all throw a mini Coachella and totally be on John Q's side.
There's a lot of people
come to his trial later and speak, basically say no, it's all good, and then he's not charged with murder, attempted murder,
right?
Even though he held,
but
a gun and threatened a whole bunch of people with it.
So this is the thing. This movie does a lot to inoculate John Quincy Archibald against all of the bad things that he's doing. For instance, you have
one bullet in his gun.
He doesn't even have the bullet in his gun. The gun is empty the entire time.
Oh yeah.
And
he
when
has
he
the
loads
one bullet
it,
for himself. Yeah.
E from Entourage says, "Are you telling me that gun's been unloaded the whole time?" And he was like, "Yeah, I was never going to kill anyone except myself." And it's like, oh, come on, John Q.
Yeah, no, this movie works a little too hard to sort of have its cake and eat it too in terms of having a hero who is a mad gunman, but also Denzel Washington, who obviously you love him, and obviously he's the good guy, and nothing about his character suggests anything menacing at all. Even the fact that he's holding a bunch of people hostage. Versus like, for instance, Rebecca Payne, Anne Heche, the hospital director, who is just like a cigarette smoking,
I believe
just
that
ice
she shoots
cold.
people on the weekend for fun.
Yeah, nothing
Kicks
redeeming about her.
puppies.
She is a bad
Lies to
person.
the mother, tells the mom that her kid's on the donor list when he's not. Like,
Because she
just a
wants
truly
John
despicable.
Q dead, because on her weekend, which is usually when she hunts people, she got pulled back into work and she needs blood. She requires
Oh.
blood. When
Which
she
brings
leaves
me
the
to my favorite
hospital.
line of this movie, by the way, which I believe it's I believe it's Frank Grimes who says, someone's talking about how it's a Saturday, and he goes, "So what? People get sick on Saturday, don't they?"
Right,
Like,
and that's the
what is
kind
that
of.
even like? What is that? What are you even trying to say, movie, with that?
Right, it's like, oh, to these people, it's just a job, but to the people on the inside who need their help, it's life or death. One of my favorite moments in this movie, this is actually a moment that I did not remember. I had it all wrong in my brain, is that when John Q's best friend is getting interviewed, he gives an eloquent John Oliver-esque speech, complete with like rhyming couplets and turns a phrase that would make Ross Perot happy. Like, it's just he's like, what you got is, you got like surgery patients, you got inpatients, you got outpatients, and you got out of luck patients. You got blue collar, you got white collar, you got no collar. And I'm like, this guy's an oratorical genius. Wasn't he like just a shit kicker 2 scenes ago? Like, what happened? I thought that he was gonna get up there and like just like, be a bit of mockery and stuff, and I'm like, oh no, this man is running for Senate. Like, if you saw that interview today on Twitter, you would suddenly see that man's name and everyone just going, he's running. Like, it's crazy. But that's how the movie goes, because every time they need someone to make a point, they become an eloquent genius. It's like an Aaron Sorkin film without the rhythm. Like, this is bad Sorkin. And Sorkin is already not great Sorkin. But like, when E like breaks down how HMOs like pay doctors not to do tests. And then when shitty girlfriend beater McGee, whatever that guy's name is it Mitch?
It's a very
Mitch.
douchebag name. Yeah.
When goddamn Mitch is talking about like, blah blah blah, like, everyone's got a gun, I don't know what I'm going to do, and then James Woody's like, he's right, God, you know how easy it is to get a gun in this kid town, like 5 minutes at a gun show. Snaps his fingers. I'm like, oh, it's an anti-gun movie now too. That's weird. I feel like the hero's holding a gun. There's a level of like hypocritical, back-breaking over correction in this movie that I feel like is intrinsic to a lot of Hollywood films, but that this one really foregrounds.
Well,
The movie is also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the movie is also sort of like will take it just to a certain level and then pull itself back from really going there in terms of its social critique. Like, it wants to say that something's wrong, but it kind of stops itself from saying who is wrong exactly, who's responsible. Like, the way that it so wants to villainize the hospital director, who's just one person directing one hospital, or like, and who probably isn't really the problem with the system at the end of the day, right? Or even I noticed that, like, and I can't really remember examples, but I even noticed there were a lot of moments in this movie where even kind of rank and file healthcare workers were kind of mean and unsympathetic to John's plight. So it's just like the movie has to work so hard to make him holding this hospital hostage feel like something that we can cheer on, but at the expense of really like sharpening its critique of like what exactly is wrong here and who is at fault.
I feel like the biggest and almost most insane example of that is the end of this movie, which doesn't just end with John being let off for the most part, or, a cute, like, wave at his son or anything, but a series of clips featuring cameos from prominent pundits, politicians, etc. that
I'm sorry.
seem
Which is Jay Leno a pundit or a politician?
um he's more of a doofus. I don't know. I don't know what the proper categorization is here, but I find the moxie of that final montage uh it's audacious. Like, to make this not just about John. And yeah, it's obviously like, I totally agree with Laura that like it's obviously trying to make some big statement, but also it's everybody. It's
Right.
everybody who's the problem. So the fact that it ends with that is just,
But it doesn't even
it's
end with
just
that. That is the
fascinating.
bridge to get us to the court scene
Oh, it is. Oh,
where
it is.
all of the
Shit, I'm
people are
sorry.
there, I presumably hoping that John doesn't go to jail.
Yeah,
James
yeah.
Woods is like, I'm here because I was held prisoner, but I kind of enjoyed it. It helped me to find my soul as a doctor again. That's the thing. That's another thing. I'm skipping around so much. I'm having so much trouble just talking about one thing in this movie. But like, this movie does feel like there should be arcs for all these characters, and none of them have any. Mitch is still a piece of shit. I don't know what Eddie Griffin is doing here. E from Entourage as a nurse, it feels like he's like gonna step up at some point because like he goes and like fixes Eddie Griffin's fingers, but then like nothing really happens again until he like has his anti-HMO speech. And like,
Yeah.
you think that like James Woods is gonna realize like he's right, like I've let like the money and the fame like ruin what was for me like a life-saving call to action. None of that. There's nothing. These people exist and then end at the same. The woman goes from blonde to brunette, and that's the sole sum of her character arc.
Now wait. It's not true because the doctor James Woods, he starts off. Do you remember? There's this hilarious scene at the beginning before John Q takes the hospital hostage, where he's like saying goodbye to like a patient he just treated who's in a
Oh my
wheelchair, and his
God.
wife, and they're
Yeah.
like this old white couple, and they're like joking about like seeing each other at the club or whatever. And he just got some. They're like, oh well, now you'll be able to play tennis again. Like now that I fixed your arm or whatever it is. And it's like that's the kind of patient he treats. And then we see him tell John and his wife that his son is dead, and or his son is dying, and they can't afford to save him. So, and then later, remember the guy with the gunshot wound.
Yes.
Oh no, wait, it's not the guy with the gunshot wound.
There,
Yes,
so there
somebody
is the
comes
guy
in,
with the
remember,
gunshot
there's a
wound
guy
who the
with a gunshot
paramedics
wound, and
bring.
then he needs to treat him, and he treats the guy with the gunshot wound, even though he's like, I can't do this. I'm not an ER doctor. This is not the kind of doctor I am. But then he treats him anyway.
10 seconds
and
later, yeah.
and then Eric from Entourage is like, you should see what this man did. He's a hero. He's a genius. Like when he's done treating the gunshot wound, like 20 minutes later. So
But
I'd
like, we
say that he
didn't
has
see
quite
it.
an arc.
That's kind of the problem, is that like we don't get to see James Woods being like, all right, you know, I had like 2 years as a trauma surgeon before I like leveled up to cardiologist. You know, like we don't see him rediscovering himself. And then that's another crazy thing, is that letting that guy in is like the thing that makes a bunch of people think that John Q is awesome. Because even though he has taken a hospital emergency room in a major metropolitan area hostage, he let in a single gunshot wound victim and then forced the medical staff underprepared to do something, and the man happened to live.
Okay, but they also John also helped that person on the phone get to another hospital, so you know he's a good
Right,
person.
yes. He saves at
did
least
give very
78
detailed
cats
direct-
in this movie.
But they all bond over their shared like frustration with the healthcare system, and that's where the movie's like message comes into play. It's like we are all in this together. Like we are all united in the
Against
fight
James
against our
Woods.
shitty healthcare.
But like, what's
and James-
also, I just don't feel like they spent, and you know, the movie doesn't need to be longer, but it really doesn't feel like they spend that much time together and get to know each other that much better. Because again, the conversations they have are so over and or underwritten, and so baldly about the issues at hand that like I don't feel like we get to know any of them. Like, there's a point where, like John says, I'm gonna murder myself. I'm gonna commit suicide to give my son my heart. And a nurse just bursts into tears and is like, that's so beautiful, it's so brave. And it's like, we know. We're aware of the sacrifice he's making. Why are you here? You know, this is bananas. And then at some point,
she's saying that because it is one of America's finest living actors, Brian. That's why she's saying it.
She wasn't supposed to have any lines. She just saw him pull off that line and she started crying. And they're like, roll on this. I don't care if she gets a SAG card and we have to pay her extra.
and pay her insurance.
Exactly.
It's also my partner pointed this out. It's really horrifying that all the EMTs left the hospital. Like when the hostage situation happened, all the EMTs ran out, leaving, you know, what are there, 2-3 doctors left? Like it's like everybody just ran out.
I would love a crossover of last week we talked about bringing out the dead.
Sure.
And I would love it if Nicolas Cage and Tom Sizemore were the paramedics that dropped off the gunshot victim.
Nicolas Cage would definitely be in there.
What the hell are those guys doing? They're like, hey, we got a guy, and he's like, go to a different hospital. They're like, you're the closest one. This guy's gonna die. And then he lets the guy in, and he's like, what's wrong with him? And the two guys are like, all right, I'm leaving. He's got a gunshot wound. Ooh. You know, because you're using a gun, but this man actually is a victim of gun violence. Think about that, John Q. And it is one of those insane. Again, all these are just the perfectly insane choices that make this movie so memorable.
Well, what I love about that sequence, though, is the EMT that doesn't immediately run away is just like looks back at John and is like loading up the van again and just looks back at him just like, man, another fucking Tuesday. Like what is going on? This is wild. He looks so unperturbed about having a gun pointed at him that he's just like, whatever, man. Like,
right, and that's why it needs to be Nicolas Cage. He can just drop the guy off and be like, I haven't saved anyone in 3 months.
I have these 8-day-year-old pizza.
It's very weird. It's very strange. And but he does. So yeah, he's gonna kill himself in a. So there's a. The movie, the show Silicon Valley has a scene
all over the place.
The show Silicon Valley has a scene where Richard needs to tell the guys not to delete something after he's told them to delete it, but his phone runs out of batteries, and then his car keys are kicked down a storm drain, and he can't get on the bus. And meanwhile, at home, the guys are like, "We should have a drink to celebrate this thing that we've created before we delete it." They're like, "Yeah." And then they get a beer, and they're like, you know what would be really good with this beer is like a lemon wedge. Yeah, and then they go and get lemons, and like all of this is just bullshit to stretch out the tension of whether or not Richard is going to be able to get there. And this movie has the same goddamn thing.
Yep. I hit the safety.
Yeah, oh, yep. The safety's on. Oh, guys, the safety was on. And then like the radio going off, and it's just like, just let him die or have the heart show up. I just don't know what to do with this moment right now. And the fact that the thing that blows my mind, and one of the reasons I brought up the fact that like it doesn't feel like these characters bond, is just the fact that Mitch or someone is like, John, you really gonna like kill yourself to save your son? And he said like only one thing is gonna stop me, and they're like, what? And he's like, if Mitch is B positive, and everyone's like, ha, John,
yeah,
Johnny boy.
That was great. That was great.
Mitch is like a dick who tried to take out John and got the crap kicked out of him by the girlfriend he was abusing, and now he's a lovable punchline to a joke about murder from the man who's been holding you hostage in terror all day.
It's also the scene with Mitch where, his girlfriend like beats him up, which, is supposed to be a triumphant moment. I still think it's funny that like they still insert shots of people laughing as he's getting the shit beat out of him. Like it's a really, like, even knowing he's most likely is a terrible person, like it still was just wild to me that people were just like, aggressively laughing. And then, as you're saying, Brian, that later thing, like it's just a joke. No worries.
Well, the movie, I guess, again, to highlight how little the movie trusts the audience to get what it's doing. Like
Yeah.
when he brings the sniper out without any pants on, we hear a person in the crowd scream, "He's got no pants on." Like,
I just remember all the boos.
there's
Yeah.
so many things like that, like inserts of like the crowd reacting so that we know that the crowd is on his side. And again, there's like so much about this movie that like sounds like it's a great idea. It's just the way
Yeah.
it's done. That's like such a weird. It's not pulpy enough to be like a kind of grindhousey or even like earnest action thriller like Tony Scott would make.
Or like Dog Day Afternoon, or
Right, and
anything in that genre. Yeah.
right, and like Dog Day Afternoon may be like a little higher end than that, but like it's also not a screaming polemic that is like, oh, Michael Moore finally decided to make a fiction film. It's this weird crossbreed in between thing that I really don't know when the last time I saw something like this was.
That's like so confused politically. I don't know. I felt it a little bit with Bombshell. Did anybody else here see Bombshell?
I did not see Bombshell.
Like, a Bombshell's strange because it is very much, you can tell it's made by someone left leaning, but it's trying to get right empathy. And when I mean right, like, they wanted the Fox News audience to watch that. Like, they're not interested in moderates. They wanted to preach to the unconverted. And like, I think that is like the last time I can really remember like a cognitive dissonance in the way that this exists. And that's, I think what's really weird is like, at various points, I tried to identify what the political conscience of this movie is, and it's so contradictory. Like, at certain points, it's libertarian. At certain points, it's, liberal. At other points, it's, like talking points about institutional waste. Like, it's just a fascinating mishmash.
It is weird because like it talks about how private healthcare fails him, and then it talks about how the state, and the government is failing him.
Sure.
The only people that come through for him are his friends and the church, but unfortunately the church is like a small church. And it also doesn't lean on that a lot either. So it's very weird because, again, I feel like in a Tony Scott film, Tony Scott, who we've discovered, clearly has an anti-authoritarian streak and loves the people like below middle management and finds every other layer of bureaucracy to be either incompetent or evil.
He's like Hawks's descendant in that way. Howard Hawks' descendant.
Yeah. And this movie is just a little too muddled and mishmashy to really like lean on any of those and go nuts about it.
Well, Brian, you also DM'd me about the strange musical sting that they do every time that it returns to the crowd.
Right, it kind of reminded me of Con Air.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking of Inside Man, but it's almost like a new metal version of that Inside Man score.
Jesus.
Oh boy.
It's memorable. I definitely thought about it. Laura, I'm sorry if we're just hating on this movie that you love. We really did find this like a fascinating experience, and I hope it's not coming across that we're just trying to hate on it or anything.
Yes, not our
No.
intention.
I mean, like, I have like a very deep connection with this movie based on just chance. You know what I mean? The fact that I watched it so much, and the fact that it's Denzel Washington, obviously. But I understand. I mean, it's too bad you can't find the joy in it that I find.
No, I think that I found that joy. Like again, I beyond the Denzel performance, which again is flawless, as all his work is flawless. It's just
It really is. It's
it's
and the boy that plays his son, by the way, is very good too. Like, all of the scenes with them are genuinely very moving and well done. what's his name? I should find his name. Mike Archibald, Daniel E. Smith. I don't know if he really did anything else, but he was very good.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was great. And again, that's just, I feel like you can almost feel in a Denzel Washington movie the work that he's probably doing off camera to like ingratiate himself to certain people, to like really find a vibe with certain people. You know, it's just, he's incredible. And as much as like as I'm giving it crap, I find, you know, a lot of these idiosyncratic choices to be more interesting than like something that was made in a lab, you know, to
Sure.
appeal to everyone. Like, it is strange that this movie, it doesn't feel like it was, I don't even know if I can say it's a singular vision. Like, it has a single writer credited, you know, but like none of these people are like strike me as being auteurs. Like, in a movie like this, Denzel Washington is the auteur
Yeah.
because he's the one who's forming everything around him. But it
The
is
writer
just such
didn't
a,
really do much else, I don't think. He was like he wrote for some TV shows, and that was kind of it. So it's kind of clear where the weak spot in this movie is. But at the same time, like, it's the batshit kind of writing that I think makes it so much fun. And there's something about a movie that is so, like, part of what was panned when this movie first came out, and I think Roger Ebert mentions this in his review, is just how earnest it is. It's just so overwrought with like earnestness. But maybe it's just the hindsight of 2020 that makes that more charming than it probably came off at the time. And then more just sort of like fun. And it's like, well, if that's the worst thing in the world, a little bit of earnestness, maybe that's not so bad after
what's
all.
also weird is that it's earnest, but as we said, it doesn't feel like it knows what it wants to be earnest about.
No, it just really wants to be earnest. When isn't that the most earnest thing?
Yeah, it's like a dumb puppy that wants to make you happy but doesn't know how, and it's just gonna flop around the house until it figures it out. I don't know. I was watching it, and it's not like some movies where I'm like, oh, I hate this. Like, I was engrossed the entire time because, as we've said, all these choices are so bizarre, and you can feel everything in this movie, and it is truly singular. I don't know. Like I said, I can't name a movie like this.
Money
Period?
Monster by Jodie Foster.
Is Money Monster like this? Like, if I were to watch Money Monster, would I say, oh, like, you know, they're really truly, like,
I don't know.
other
We
than
were
just-
talking. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say we were talking before. I find it so hard to not interrupt people on when we're recording like this. I apologize.
No,
When
I'm
we
fine
were
with it.
talking about how this movie is sort of like a complete '90s movie, even though it was made in 2002. The movie that it reminds me of is Speed, which was I think 1995. But it's got very Speed kind of mid '90s thriller energy, where it's just like it's very patently ridiculous situation that would never happen. And it's sort of like vaguely righteous in its tone, and you know, kind of wants to stick up for the little guy. And there's like a motley assortment of like central casting kind of characters. So to me, it's sort of like in that vein. But it just like it because it doesn't totally, like I was saying before, commit to being like one or the other, like a thriller or a melodrama or what. It kind of maybe makes it a little bit more singular.
Yeah, and I think that Speed pulls off better that whole, like, everyone is disparate and now they're coming together as a unit
Yeah.
thing, and this movie does not really land that plane at all.
Well, they're all on a bus, so it makes a little more sense. If I may, Speed was a little more realistic than Adventure. I mean, come on.
Oh, I love that.
That's going to be a new thing that we do on this podcast, right? Where we ask, is this more realistic than John Q? Speed, yes. John Wick, probably.
Well, I'm kind of curious too, Laura. Before we started, you mentioned that not only is this comfort food for you in the sense of it being a Denzel Washington film, but it's also a very specific kind of, beyond the energy, like it's a very specific kind of middle brow, um, straight ahead, kind of
Mm.
hammer-headed action thriller that we
Yeah,
don't really.
it's a very easy movie to watch, right? And yeah, we don't see a lot of this anymore. I mean, it's either, a big kind of blockbuster franchise kind of movie or like more of an indie, and there's not as much in between. And I think this sort of like very broad strokes, almost like lowest common denominator, like you can watch this with your kids. Like my boyfriend has an 8-year old, and I find like it's going back to the 90s and early 2000s, it's so much easier to find movies that aren't like cartoons or necessarily made for kids, but that like a kid can watch and an adult can watch together. Like I find like
Huh.
nowadays, like that's actually kind of hard to find. Like it's either like completely like a Disney animated movie that is obviously a kids movie, with like jokes, inside jokes tossed in for the adults, and or like, just an adult movie that's going to be like too racy in some way for a kid to watch. And there's just like, I don't know, there's not a lot of this just sort of like a movie that a bunch of people can watch together. Maybe that's just also a sort of symptom of the fact that fewer people watch movies by like going out with the family all together to see something, or like renting a movie to watch together. Like you can really
Yeah, you can
tailor your own
fragment it
experience,
now.
right? But I think there is something like something lost when we don't have those kinds of movies that aren't maybe amazing on a sort of technical level or logical level, but that are just like a really elemental, like it's just like a movie with a capital M. Like you can see what it's like, all the big broad strokes of what it's trying to do as it's doing it, and it's like very much announcing to you what it's doing as it's doing it. And there is something kind of fun in that. And I don't know, maybe as a kid, me watching this movie over and over, it was like almost like seeing that structure that's usually a little bit more subtle and hidden underneath the surface.
I mean,
You
it's
know, it's
interesting that you say that because now I'm thinking about like all the times I would go to a friend's house for like a sleepover and we'd watch like Con Air,
Right.
or like those kinds of movies, and the parents would be like, "I am fine with this. This is fine."
Yeah.
It's like
Or
it
how
is.
big like Titanic was when I was a kid. I remember it was like a big
yeah,
event, and it was like one of the first movies that was like an adult movie that we were allowed to see because it was like somehow important that we watched it. I don't know. I remember that being the feeling, and it wasn't totally appropriate in moments, but it was like okay enough.
sure.
Um, we don't really see that enough movies like that anymore, that are really just sort of hitting that really are do feel like they're trying to please everybody. And I don't wish that there be every movie be like that, but I wish that there were more these days.
I think it's weird because as I get older, like as a kid, I was obsessed with other things. I've mentioned this on here. This is a very dorky thing about when I was a kid. I used to be obsessed with ratings because my parents wouldn't let me see R-rated movies. So I was obsessed with like why things were rated R, for instance, or PG-13, as a way to try to persuade my parents to let me see it. And like I think what's interesting as I get older is that like this type of PG-13 movie doesn't even necessarily exist anymore. I feel
Yeah.
like even thrillers we get, like, they might be really stylish or something, but they're really edgy and they're really, pushing the bar, whether, I'm not gonna whatever. Like something like Deadpool, for instance, I could see that being PG-13, a decade and a half ago. But now it's like a hard R. And like the gimmick, of course, is that it's a hard R. But like I still think I know that's obviously in a different budget arena than what we're talking about. But I still think there's something really interesting about this being PG-13, but also us pointing out that like offensive lowest common denominator quality. Like the same you're talking about, Brian, with Con Air. Like Con Air is a lot of bad taste jokes.
Oh, really?
That,
You think so?
but
You
like,
think Sally
but they're
Can't Dance is a not a great role model for the kids?
but it's not just it's not that just that budget. I think there is really something interesting to that idea of something appealing to everyone. And I feel this actually with my mom when I have to be so careful what I recommend to her these days. Like there's some things that, they're not going to be violent or they're not going to, have too much swears or sex or something. But like I feel like so many of the larger movies these days, they're like incredibly violent as a baseline. Like there's such a odd like tameness to this. Like it has those moments of like I don't know, like these intermittent thrills, I guess I'll call them.
Well, that's the weirdest thing about calling this a thriller is that like there's not a lot of
No.
thrills. Like this is a very relaxing movie. I like, and maybe it's just because I watched it before, but like, there's only like one time where there's any tension that something might like bad happen.
When he almost gets shot.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
yeah.
you can again watching it today, you can feel the movie setting up all the ways in which he will not get shot. Like the just everything, just like the fact that the news is on it, the fact that Eddie Griffin is there and is like calling his attention, and just everything. Like the movie is not going to end this way. Like this isn't that kind of film.
Did you like that they unscrambled the police encryption?
I loved that they had like a teenager in the back of the news van who was like,
Who sounded stoned? It was weird.
like budget DJ
Well,
Qualls.
of course he is.
I also want to say I said Sally can't dance, and I had to know if I was right. And yes, that is the name of the character in Con Air. I don't know why I retained that. I just needed to toot my own horn. I don't know why. Yeah, there is again something about this movie. And it's one of the reasons why I kept thinking it was from the 90s, because it does have that vibe to it of like this movie is a movie that is existing to tell this story and doesn't appear like it's trying to peg itself to anything or really sell anything else, and then we don't get a lot of that. Like I sometimes think about the movie Fallen, another Denzel Washington film, which we perhaps will talk about someday as we work our way through his filmography.
Is that a procedural?
It's like a procedural thriller that also has like a supernatural element to it.
Okay.
It's like, has anyone on this podcast seen it?
What,
Fantastic. Fallen.
No.
He's a police detective who is super excited to see a serial killer get put to death, only to realize, maybe too late, that the man who he put to death may actually have simply been inhabited by a demon.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I think about it because like it's got John Candy, no, not John Candy. It's got John Goodman in it. It's got Tony Soprano, whose name I just blanked on for some reason.
James Gandolfini?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's but it's such a weird movie because like it's not a special effects showcase. It's not like a crazy action thriller. It is a small mid-tier thriller procedural mystery that is centered on whether the demon Azazel has taken over a man and is now trying to find its way into Denzel Washington by ruining his life systematically. It's such a weird movie. I'm so happy it exists. It will never be made again. Like that kind of film just doesn't exist. John Q is another film that like it really used to be like if Denzel Washington wants to make a movie, that movie's going to get made. Mm-hmm. And we just don't have that anymore. And yeah, it's curious to think about like what are the movies nowadays that I guess you could go and like see as a family that like would have something for everyone.
Sure.
I guess it like mainly just horror movies, and like only again if your kid's down for a horror movie. You know?
Yeah, there's like a lot of things I can't recommend to my mom. Like I'm like, oh, that's like I was amazed when she watched The Irishman. Like, but even that is like relatively tame as far as Scorsese goes.
Yeah, like if a teenager was like, "What's out now that I should see?" I'd be like, "I don't know." I guess a movie that kind of feels similar to this would be something like Ready or Not. Just in terms of like, I could see like taking a 12-year-old and like a 35-year-old to see that movie.
I feel like a lot of the Jean Calais, like specifically the Liam Neeson, like maybe PG-13 thrillers,
Yeah.
I could see having. Like I'm surprised those don't make 200 million.
Right, yeah,
Like
they ought to.
they're
I mean, The
yeah
Shallows. I mean, okay, so
yeah
yeah, if I were to
shallows.
choose a director to remake Fallen, I would want it to be Jan Sarah.
What about John Q? Besides Clint Eastwood.
Um, Darren Aronofsky.
Yikes.
All right. So yeah, Laura, this was your choice.
Wow.
Are there any other? Bill's just chiming in with the wow. This was your choice to talk about this. Was there anything else that you wanted to speak about this before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered it all. Thanks for chatting for an hour plus about John Q.
I'm so excited that we were able to do this. I hope that in our manic state we did in fact hit everything. I feel like I'm gonna wake up at 1 a.m. and be like, oh no, we didn't talk about this one very important part. Again, I just want to say, like, the woman in the BMW straight up deserved to die, and I'm glad that she did so that Mike could survive.
Amen.
I want to underline how crazy it is that this movie opens with a BMW commercial, basically, and then drops it after she is brutally killed in a head-on collision. And then it only cuts back to her when John Q says, I'm hoping for an act of God.
Oh, there is something I wanted to add. You reminded me. So apparently on the DVD commentary, I didn't actually hear it, but apparently either the writer or the director says that what the movie is about is a miracle happening and John, like, making way for the miracle to happen, which I guess they mean the woman dying in the car crash, and then becoming, the donor for Mike. But like, I think that kind of explains why they open this movie with the car commercial, because it's like, if you see the movie as about a miracle and it's just all these other like gazillions of plot twists and characters are just like really forming a backdrop for this like true theme of the movie, which is, wow, a miracle happened.
What's crazy is that I kind of love that. And I would love a movie that was about that, but I don't feel like this is that movie.
That's not that. I know, but clearly, like, if the movie's about anything, it's about like the need for socialized medicine. You know what I mean? It's like, what a way around the what your movie is very obviously about and what everyone is taking away from it.
I can't find any. Apparently, I think there's something wrong with my IMDb right now. I was going to go look up one of those like crazy Christian movies that like is about like the guy who fell through the ice or the girl who's running.
Heaven is for real and
Okay, so
that kind of
Overcomer is one of the movies that I was thinking of. So like, what if this movie was directed by Alex Kendrick,
who did Fireproof.
the director of Overcomer? What if they really leaned into the miracle part? Like, what if they kept all of the basics the same? Like, it's still got to be Denzel Washington. He's still got to bring a gun into an emergency room. But what if it really does, in the end, wrap up with, because the movie does like make a point that this is a Christian family. Like, they go to church, and the wife even says, like, I would tell you what I think of you, but I'm a Christian woman. But like, what if it really leaned into like the evangelical cinema?
Oh,
I would love that. That actually might be a great movie. I would love a Christian movie that's legitimately like, take a gun, go make a miracle happen.
Oh God.
That is the final thought that I will leave it. Oh, James Parsons says David Fincher for the Fallen remake. I could be for that, but I think David Fincher's not making any more movies ever again. His Fallen would also be like $300 million, and I would have no idea why.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Speaking of, Martin Scorsese, $200 million to make Killers of the Flower Moon. What's up? Crazy man. So that's it for today. We have talked about John Q. We hope that you have enjoyed it. If you are listening to this and have an idea for a movie that you would like us to cover, feel free to tweet us or email us, podcast@filmastage.com. We are keeping a running total because, again, we do not know how long this quarantine is going to last, and we're working our way through some stuff. to be able to still keep talking to you week to week. We hope that if you listened live on YouTube, that you enjoyed it. Keep an eye out on our social media for next week. We will tell you when we're going to record and when you can listen live so that you, like James, can chime in when we ask a question. Instead of shouting it at your phone, you could actually type an answer to us. We are brought to you by Mubi, mubi.com/filmstage for a free 30-day trial of Mubi. Presently, they have A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night by Anna Lily Amanpour. And a bunch of other great films. Again, that is mubi.com/filmstage. Don't forget to go to patreon.com/filmstage show to give us your money. And Michael Snydell, next week, are we talking about the true history of the Kelly Gang?
Yeah. Yes,
All right.
we are.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. The star of 1917, the director of Assassin's Creed.
Oh, it's Kurtzel?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
How could you be excited about it without knowing that?
I don't know. I kind of forgot about it, to be honest.
So the answer is you were not excited about it. Oh, man. All right. Well, it's been a true joy. Lars Aram, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for bringing us John Q. Thank you for giving us an excuse to talk about John Q.
Anytime.
Fantastic. Would you like to tell the people at home where they could find you online?
At Lars Aram on Twitter.
Awesome. Bill Graham. Uh-oh.
You can find me on Twitter. Uh-oh. What?
Bill's lagging.
Sorry.
It's okay. Just tell us where we can find you, Bill.
You can find me on Twitter at CableBFG. You can also find me trying to fix my internet right here, right now, live. And you can also find me on the Slack channel, mixing it up.
All right, Michael Snydell.
You can find me on Twitter at Snydell. You can find me on Letterboxd. I'll have a piece at the Spool about the restoration of 1,000 Pieces of Gold, which will be available through the in Chicago, the Siskel Center Virtual Cinema this week. I'll tweet about it. It's available other places, but I'm looking forward to being able to write about that one. Kind of a lost film at the moment.
All right. As for me, you can find me on all the social medias at Brian J. Rowan. Don't forget to go to schmidtspirits.com to give to the GoFundMe to help my distillery produce hand sanitizer for our community. I think that's it. I don't think I have anything else. Find every episode of this podcast at thefilmstage.com along with all of our writings. We will be talking about the true history of the Kelly Gang next week, so look forward to that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and tune in next time. I am shocked that no one yelled at me for playing a song that said "Owner of a Broken Heart" as the intro for this movie.
Oh, I get it. I just got that.
There we go.
Good.
All right.
I gotta go.